Breaking news. It looks like the rumors were true after all. The San Francisco Shock are looking to make some roster changes, and they kicked it off by announcing that they're parting ways with DPS player Heesang, and he is actually going to be moving over to the Vancouver Titans to be the replacement for Aspire at DPS. No pun intended here, but this is a pretty shocking turn of events. All of the rumors and the leakers out there were saying that the Shock definitely were going to get rid of Heesang, but there was no indication whatsoever that the Vancouver Titans plan to swoop him up and be their quick replacement while they're in a pinch. This move could be beneficial to both sides. For the Shock, it was obvious they needed to make some kind of change at DPS. Heesang, while talented and while he does have a lot of potential, just wasn't working out in Krusty's system in particular. He wasn't performing up to par, up to those expectations of him potentially being a Rookie of the Year candidate. He fell very short of that benchmark and was not a good complementary piece to Proper whatsoever. Outside of like a couple of decent games on Hanzo, he really wasn't doing much to contribute. His Tracer, despite being very good in contenders, was kind of below average from what we saw when he did play her, and his Sombra, more importantly, just wasn't on the same wavelength as the rest of the team. Those EMPs were often poorly timed, and he was just putting his team in a bigger hole. For one reason or another, he just wasn't working out, and oftentimes people were labeling him as one of the biggest individual problems of the San Francisco Shock. You can decide who you think the main culprit is. All I know is, even though this move makes sense and that it was probably for the best, it feels weird and almost wrong to see the Shock give up on such a talented player so soon. If you're the Shock though, you really didn't have much of a choice here. If this was still year one of their post-championship rebuild, they might be a bit more willing to be patient with this guy, give him more of a chance to develop and synergize with this core, but they don't really have that luxury because of what happened in Season 1, in their supposed rebuilding year, where they ended up going way ahead of schedule and getting just one map away from winning a grand finals. It's because of how much they overperformed last year that they have a lot of pressure on themselves this year to finish the job. And so far, they have massively underperformed in comparison to those expectations, so they really have no choice but to make some desperation moves to turn this season around before it's too late and still give themselves some kind of fighting chance. And in the Shock's eyes, that means moving away from Heesang. But as the old saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure, so cue the Vancouver Titans, who immediately swoop in and pick this guy up right when he enters the waiver. This was some fast and smart thinking by the Vancouver Titans to manage a way to pick this guy up. After the recent Aspire drama, they had a massive hole that needed to be filled at their DPS line. He was one of their most important contributors, so you need to get someone with an equally high ceiling, and Heesang fits the bill. Now, just given how he played on the Shock, a lot of people will view this as a high-risk, high-reward signing. There's a possibility we get the same version of him that we saw on the Shock, if not even worse now that he's on a mixed roster for the first time in his career, but at the same time, he might just need a fresh start. That potential of his might be able to shine through in a new system where there's more resources put into him. There's not as many big name players to share a spotlight with. He could actually, in theory, over time, become their star player that they do absolutely everything for. Him and Sugar Free could be a pretty scary duo, at least on the surface, and I think the great thing for Heesang is that he's going to be in a more stable team environment. I know there was some recent drama with Aspire and management and all that, but I'm talking in-game, he's going to have the support line that he wished that he had on the San Francisco Shock. Crimzo and Faith are by no means a god-tier backline, but they are a very stable, consistent presence that just might help him out a bit more since they have not been struggling nearly as much as Vindame Finn. I'm loving this idea of giving Heesang the opportunity to become a star player on a weaker team where the expectations are a lot lower. And if you're the Titans, you are likely going to be making a high-risk signing no matter who you chose to try and recaptivate the amazing glory that your DPS line once had, so you might as well go all out and get someone with some of the highest potential possible on the market. market. I like this partnership a lot. It's a great way for Heesang to have his redemption arc and become the star player we know he can be, and it could give the Titans that boost to still remain relevant and to not crumble and have this great season of theirs continue, at least for the time being. Aside from the obvious factor of whether Heesang can actually perform up to his potential or not, there's always the concern of hit scan as well. That's like my biggest fear. How are the Titans going to work around that? Heesang is more so known as a flex, as a sugar free, so this is going to be something they have to figure out. In the short term, I think they'll be okay. Heesang has shown he can play the Hanzo. Also, there's going to be a lot of Sombra Tracer anyway. But if there is a meta shift, and for those maps where hit scan is a bit more in demand, I don't know how the Titans are going to adjust. That's going to be a very interesting process, and a lot of that is unfortunately going to be on Heesang to step up his game. Now, if my memory isn't failing me, I do believe he has played some hit scan in the past, maybe like a little bit of Widow. I think Sojourn and Ashe as well. From time to time, he did play that stuff, and if it is his main focus, maybe he'll do really well on it. And also, I think he's going to feel pretty comfortable just knowing how flexible Sugar Free is, especially even just in the Tracer Sombra. Sugar Free can do both, so it's kind of a matter of what he's saying is more comfortable on. So I think on the Titans, he's going to feel pretty happy. There's going to be less pressure on him to perform, and he's going to feel like he can be more like himself. I'm loving this partnership a ton, and I'm looking forward to seeing how him and the Titans bounce back, and what the Shock's game plan is to try and adjust and get themselves back on the right track. Moving away from the Shock Titans news, we also have a couple of other things to highlight, starting with the NYXL. They announced that they are ditching both Halo and Lep at main support, and they're going to be replacing them with former Toronto Defiant and Atlanta Reign main support, Ojee. Honestly, when this move first happened, I was a little worried. They waited an entire day before announcing Ojee, so a lot of people were theorizing that they might end up sticking with Fitz on support, and we all didn't want to see that, so I'm glad they did pick up a new person. But I don't know if this is anything more than a side grade unless Ojee seriously steps up his game. A big problem for New York was they didn't have a well-rounded enough main support. They basically only had a good Lucio and Lep in their eyes, which is why they ditched them. But Ojee kind of provides a lot of the same. He is mostly known for his Lucio. And in some people's opinions, Lep was actually playing better than Ojee, at least individually. But who knows, maybe New York felt like Lep wasn't a great fit considering that he only played like half of the time and they'd rather have Fitz in there at support. So maybe Ojee is what they need. Maybe he provides a fresh mindset and he synergizes better with creative and he's just more reliable overall. They feel like his Brig can get the job done and he can still be that serviceable Lucio that we all know he can be. Like, I don't necessarily hate the signing. It's not exactly like he makes the team worse, but I don't know how he's going to make this team a lot better outside of maybe a somewhat more stable presence, especially after how he played on Toronto Defiant. A lot of people argue he was one of the worst main supports in the league on Toronto, so he's got a lot of work cut out for him. But like I said with Heesang, maybe all he really needed was a fresh start. He's been playing with the same guys literally for years, so perhaps a different approach could help him unleash more of his true potential at the Overwatch League level. Maybe he can be that veteran, that leader for New York that they've been desperately craving, that kind of makes the whole team feel closer together. It'll be the glue that keeps them from completely unraveling in a lot of situations where they probably shouldn't. But that's best case scenario, right? Because Ojee himself isn't the most amazing player in the world. He's not on a super impactful role, and it's hard to see how he's going to completely change the dynamic of this team and make them significantly better than what we've already seen. It'll be fun to find out what he can contribute, but expectations maybe aren't the highest. But hey, if this means we no longer have to watch Fitz go over to Brig Jail, then I'm all for it. Let this guy cook on DPS, that's what he deserves. And before we end the video, I also wanted to quickly highlight that the London Spitfire also made a couple of moves yesterday when they released both Lethal and Skairipa from their main roster. Generally, not much to say here. Both of them weren't very good contributors at all, despite being the new guys, the guys that were supposed to give them more versatility. They just failed in every way. Skairipa's positioning was too aggressive, and Lethal was getting absolutely nothing done as this team's Tracer player, so it was for the best to move on from them and stick with their main core that just works better. Not to sound super mean here, but they were probably worse off with these guys than they are without them. They just weren't doing anything to help this team win. They only made them worse when they got subbed in, so I think London made the correct decision in this scenario. As for what they plan to do to replace them, I don't know if they actually will make any other signings. They might just stick with this Ojee 5 and see how the rest of the season goes. The rumblings are that they plan to get Sauna from the Florida Mayhem, but I have no idea if that's coming true or not. It's just a rumor, so I'm not going to confirm or deny anything. We'll just have to see what they can do. And that does it for this news video. A lot of spicy stuff is going down in the league right now with last-second roster changes, and this is probably not the end of it. We could probably get some more news as early as later today, so definitely subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss out on any of these other news videos. They're going to be coming out hot. Look forward to them. And if you enjoyed this video, it would mean a lot to me if you could give it a like and leave a comment with some of your own thoughts about these moves down in the comments below. I've been ATP, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.